welcome to How to Win the Lottery Season 3 Internet Module, Matrix Module, Outer Space Module, Tugboat Module, Neuromancer by William Gibson. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
I'm Shreds doing 1080s in the half pipe that is your ear hole.
And welcome back to the show.
Oh, may I say before we get started to our listeners, Merry Christmas. We're coming up on it.
This might be our Christmas episode. Unless things happen and we move things around again.
We're
running out of episodes that we could rearrange the schedule for, though.
The snow is falling. The chestnuts are roasting on an open fire. That lovable scamp Rudolph's little nose is lighting up the skies to make a clear pathway for old Saint Nick.
If this episode comes out when it's intended, as we're recording it, it will be between Christmas and New Year's. So how's that New Year's resolution going? Have you run a mile?
Happy New Year to our listeners as well, who I assume are doing better with their New Year's resolutions than I am. I haven't run that mile yet. I don't think I've run a mile all year. How are you? You're running miles pretty regularly?
Yeah.
What's your time?
I don't really, I can run a 10-minute mile forever, basically. I think I can pretty consistently do, between 8 and 9.
You got to get it down to 6.
I don't think I will ever get it down to 6. I think that's a lot.
Did you ever get it down to, were you between 6 and 7 when you were in high school?
No. I ran a faster mile. We also might have had the same exact conversation when we talked about New Year's resolutions earlier
this is the way
this
it
year.
goes. That's the way it goes, baby.
I ran my fastest mile ever last year, I think, which was 7:30. But I remember
7:30 is good. That's 7:30. That's what I was running when I was in high school, something around that.
I remember having a friend who was not like a close friend, but a friendly kid. I was friendly with, whatever. And he was we were doing some actual fun gym activity. He asked the teacher, he's like, "Hey, can I go run a mile?" And she's like, "Yeah, okay."
What's the homework?
And then he came back. He's like, "Yeah, I run a 6-minute mile." I was just like.
He timed himself? Yeah.
No, I think he brought a friend who timed him or something. I don't know. They also might not have run a mile. Who knows? I'm realizing this now. But I also think that, if you run a 6-minute mile, it might be fun to run a mile. You might want to go do, just to see how fast you can run.
Like anything that you're good at, it's you want to best yourself. And but if, you're the type of person that runs an 8-9-minute mile, it's you're just trying to get through that mile without dying, without the stabbing pains going through your sides.
And then you feel bad for the kids who run a 14, 15, 17-minute mile, just
14, I can walk a mile faster than that.
Yeah.
Can I? Probably 15 minutes.
I think if you have a quick-ish stride, a 15-minute walking mile is kind of the target. I think when you do Google Maps, they estimate, I think, a 20-minute mile for, if you're doing walking things. But, if you, push it, I think 15 is about... Anyway, Neuromancer.
Happy New Year to everyone.
You got New Year's resolutions for next year?
I'm going to try. Not a promise. Some of this is out of my control. I'm going to try to have... a healthier stomach. That's it.
Oh.
That's it.
Not run a mile.
Less stomach issues.
Okay.
Less stomach issues.
Do you have a plan to tackle that? Or you just hope for the best?
I have. I'm back on the pantoprazole to help me with the acidic stuff.
Okay.
A lot of it's about sleep maintenance because that causes problems for me. Stress.
You have a plan. You have a plan.
It's also about lowering stress incrementally so that I can make myself a healthier person.
Okay,
all around.
That's fair. So you have a plan. You have an attack plan.
Yeah, whether or not I'll go through with it, I don't know. I might keep drinking soda and eating fast food and getting diarrhea.
Well, you have 2 months to finalize this plan until this episode comes out, or more, depending on when this happens.
Yeah, I'm killing time here because I have no idea what to say about this book.
Bob, what is Neuromancer about?
I don't know.
So I think disclaimer, maybe not a disclaimer. If you love this book, you're I want to hear 2 people talk about my favorite book, don't listen to this episode. I don't hate this book. I think I like it about as much as Snow Crash.
I liked it better than Snow Crash.
I think if I read it again, I would like it more than Snow Crash. But this is not a genre that we're good at, that we enjoy, really. I think I like sci-fi. I don't like reading sci-fi because my dumb brain can't visualize the stuff. I get bogged down in the details and I lose track of everything.
Well, I do. I think... So it's a very visual novel.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of very, very descriptive language. And I think the novel's strengths sort of tend toward describing a kind of world and a fashion that are easy to picture. And I don't have a problem picturing all of that stuff. But like once it starts going into computer things
Right.
and all of the technological stuff, I'm less. My brain is less inclined in that direction. And he does a thing like, whereas Neil Stephenson will tell you a thing and then describe what that thing is, William Gibson does not bother with that shit at all. He'll just tell you a thing and then be like, figure it out, dork. And like, I'm moving on.
Yeah.
Which I kind of like, because I see the text on the page as its own aesthetic value. Like even like there's the, the prosody of how we like internalize the reading of text, the music of the individual letters, and how like you get into a rhythm of speaking, and even if the way that it like some of this stuff is like a foreign language, but like if you're going through it, it sounds very nice in your head, the same way that like reading a like very well written technical manual can also be pleasing if you're a certain kind of person.
I think what frustrated me about this is that there are certain things that are not futuristic. Like there's the scene or the sequence or whatever you want to call it where he like burns a wasp nest. And like that's in like modern day, or I don't know, but like it felt like, oh, I can picture this, I can visualize this really well. And like I appreciate he's a really good writer. It's just like you're saying, he's using all these words. Like I know you we both read the wiki. Did you just read the plot summary or did you read the whole wiki?
Just the plot summary.
Okay. So
there was one of the, I actually like I did see something on the wiki that I want to talk about that wasn't plot summary.
What's that?
It's that 2/3 of the way through his writing this novel, the movie Blade Runner came out, and he was just like, "Fuck! What am I gonna do?
Which is really
My
funny.
life is over."
We're not talking to William Gibson, but we were talking about like what we would have talked to, and I do think that like, because I think, okay, so this book comes out in 84, Blade Runner's in 82, Snow Crash is in 92, so there's a long time between this and Snow Crash. But like Snow Crash, this is very influential in shaping the way that people thought about things and talked about things. So this is very early, if not the first or the first main cyberpunk thing.
I think it's the first use of the word cyberspace.
So he coined cyberspace in an earlier thing, in a novelette called Burning Chrome, which came out in 82.
Which is still part of the sprawl thing, right?
Yes,
so
I
that's
think so.
That's within this universe.
But he used this popularized terms like cyberspace and ICE, not the ICE like the immigration, but the intrusion, countermeasures, electronics.
That's not something that I'm familiar with. That's not like part
Neither
of my
am
pop
I.
culture.
But they also said that they think that people have credited this with the way that the internet, specifically the World Wide Web, developed. That they're like, this, he tapped into a thing that like makes it easy to understand, or that we can see this is how it builds out or whatever. And I think that's fascinating. Obviously, also one of my favorite movies, a movie you'd not seen and you also like to hate on, The Matrix, pulls a lot from this. But he also, like,
I've seen The Matrix.
Oh, you just don't like it.
Yeah, I saw it like a year ago or something like that. And
This is news to me.
no, I watched it, and I feel, I feel as though had I seen it in 1999, I might be singing a different tune about it, because it's like, whatever. Anyway.
But he said about The Matrix that, quote, this was exactly the kind of creative cultural osmosis he'd relied upon in his own writing. He's like, I took things from other things and I made my thing. They're taking things from mine. Like, he loves, it seems like he loves
Well,
this.
I'll say, I think, I can see his work being very clearly influenced by John Brunner and by
Who's John Brenner? What would I know?
he's like a forerunner of science fiction.
Okay.
And
Did he write anything famous or not really?
gosh,
I can't Google it.
what is I think it's called True Names is what he
I
wrote,
don't know.
and then Werner Vinge is the other guy. That
I know that name from you, but I don't know.
so these are two like sci-fi cyberpunkish guys that sort of, I think, like their work sort of leans into the like techno libertarian era of but these are like I think like 60s and 70s guys, so I can see him borrowing from them.
I don't read a lot of sci-fi today, but one person that I do read when he has a new book out that we talked about, but I don't know if you've read. Have you read Blake Crouch stuff or no?
No,
because he did the Wayward Pines thing, which I've not read, but I saw the show. But he did other books that I really, really like. And I think what's interesting, and like I can't imagine, like you again saying watching The Matrix in '99, I can't imagine what it would have been like to read this then, because like this is so like this feels in a way like modern still today. But like the way that Blake Crouch is doing stuff, he's just talking about like gene splicing and stuff like that. Like he takes a very specific thing. I know it's just like one example of a thing, but it's not like he's like really pushing the ball downfield in terms of like establishing things that are going to like change the way people think about stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe, but like this just feels like, hey, there's a whole like Wild West out there. I'm going to do a thing. And Blake Crouch is like, let's hone in on this one very, very specific idea and what would happen if it broke bad or something, which is, I think, is fascinating. This just feels like, holy shit, like I can't believe.
Well, also you referring to it as the Wild West is interesting because he's like a quote unquote console cowboy, right? Yeah. And like the idea behind that is that he is like in some ways like pioneering, like through like in the same way that like, you know, the West was pioneered. He's like, you know, pressing up against boundaries that people haven't been through yet, but in like as far as cyberspace is concerned.
You're talking about Case, the main character?
Case, yeah.
So I think what this is about on a really macro level is also kind of like the Philip K. Dick thing and like the Turing test and like there's like the Turing police. It's a lot of different things that like, I don't know what came before. I would assume most of it came before, and he's like, but stuff that became like Minority Report and stuff like that. And
most of Philip K. Dick's stuff I think comes before this.
And Isaac Asimov's like 3 Rules of Robotics. It just feels like this is things where it's like we're bordering. I think this is what the novel is about. It just takes a while to sort of get there, but we're bordering on AI becoming sentient, becoming super consciousness, and there's police that's been established, like the Turing police, like the Alan Turing, the Turing test.
Explain what the Turing test is. I know what it is because I'm a super genius, but you're looking at me like I don't know. Should I explain it so that people know that I know?
This is a very Never Not Funny thing where it's just like Jimmy will be like, of course I know what the Turing test is, but for Matt over there, can you please explain what the Turing test is? So I don't know if you're doing that.
I do.
Okay. So my boss likes to say that the Turing test is not for a machine to pass, but it's for people to fail. The Turing test is basically if you're talking to someone...
And your boss is Elon Musk, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Love him.
Love
that man.
Keep going.
My house, as you can see, the walls are lined with this $100 burnt hair cologne. The Turing test is a test that AI is basically written to try to pass, where it would seemingly convince someone that they are talking to a person when in fact they're talking to AI. And there's been, in the last year, I think this is what's fascinating to me, and I think that this is also why conceptually I like this novel more. I don't like the actual reading of it because I just don't like reading sci-fi, but I think reading about tech so often that like people from Google, 1 or 2 people I think were fired because they're like, we created like our AI is already sentient, and Google's like, no it's not, you're fired. And like there are fears out there that like at a certain point, once AI can like think for itself, like we're all fucked.
Yeah.
And so the Turing test is like trying to convince people that like, oh, like I thought, like it's like chatbots but like good. And so they just use a Turing police. But that was Alan Turing's like the Turing test. And this is probably like not a great explanation, but it's like if an AI passes the Turing test, we're in trouble.
Alan Turing being one of the World War II code breakers that invented what we think of now as a computer.
That's the Imitation Game, right? That's a Benedict Cumberbatch thing, right? Yeah.
And then he was chemically castrated by the government for being gay.
Super sweet.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that for him. But like so in this world, the AI is bordering on super consciousness, and there are people that are trying to advance that for their own probably self-interests and to, you know, power or whatever. So the Turing police are basically, hey, we need to shut this shit down. And there is this really wealthy family,
the Tessier Ashpools or something like that.
Yeah. Who have basically created 2 halves that when they merge, if they merge, will create a super consciousness.
One of whom is Neuromancer, who's represented by a little boy.
Yep.
And the other of whom is
Wintermute,
which is a pretty badass name for like a... Yeah. And it's like all filtered through not only science fiction, but like what we often have in these books is like a Raymond Chandler-esque noir.
Yeah.
Right. This.
So I think you saying that very early in my reading, like
it helps, right?
This,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Because it's like you look at it, if you strip away all of the science fiction stuff, like don't worry about reading about how like there are these fancy special guns that like turn into laser whips or whatever. Like forget that stuff. Just think it's like what you have is a drunk detective who's being given a second chance.
And, like, he thinks he's doing one thing, and surprisingly, and it's like he's doing basically the opposite of that thing.
Yeah. You think you've been hired for good reasons, but you've actually been hired by a evil corporation to undermine, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, it's very much like within multiple traditions. And if you're familiar with both of those traditions, it'll help unlock the book for you. If you're really smart, I am familiar with both of these traditions, and it did not really unlock the book for me. I still like had a tough time making heads or tails of what was actually happening on a page-to-page basis.
Yeah, because there's what, and I think you alluded to this earlier, but like with Snow Crash, Neil Stephenson was like, here's 4 different words that you've never heard before, but here's how they're used in a sentence, and here's what they mean, and here's how they interact. And Neuromancer's just like, yeah, the flim flam with the jib jab, and like, fuck you. It's just like, I don't understand any of it.
Which is what I prefer. I prefer an author to trust their audience and to go in there. And it also probably, if William Gibson was doing that, this book would be 200 pages more than it currently is.
Yeah. He took this from a lot of I copied it from the wiki. Dope dealer slang in the 1960s in Toronto and biker talk. Just like, I think again, a book about language.
Yeah.
Where different groups of people have specific ways of communicating, and he just kind of cribs that and like meshes it all together in a way that like everybody has this kind of, not everybody, but everybody we run into who are people running in a very specific high-tech kind of crowd.
Yeah, I love that. I love that he's doing that. I love that it's like a little bit opaque, because the world is opaque to us. I don't understand. What's your take on? I don't remember if we talked about this during Snow Crash, but what is your take on these guys' obsession with Japan?
I don't know. And again, I think it's we did talk about this in Snow Crash, and I don't know if people. I'll use the word weebs. I think it's the right word. The people who like love Japan and Japanese culture, if they've always loved that, or if it's because they love things like this who fetishize Japanese culture. They're like, my favorite book loves it. I still don't know the answer to that question.
I also don't know, other than cribbing some very specific things. I don't actually know what about this book is Japanese at all, other than it saying like ninja, shuriken, yakuza,
China virus.
Here's the. Yeah, that's another thing, is at some point, probably about maybe 2/3 of the way through, they start talking about the Chinese virus. And, like, of course, we are now 152 years into COVID, but, like, the indelible impression of Donald Trump just saying the Chinese virus over and over again is, like, in all of our heads. And so every time I was reading it, I was hearing it in his voice, and it was just like, I feel like my brain is rotting.
Because what's weird, so you say it doesn't feel, I don't think it feels Asian at all. I think people set stuff in Japan because I've never been to Tokyo, but from what I've heard, from what I've seen in both movies and just pictures and stuff, like they're so far advanced. Like it feels like the future.
High fluorescent, minimalist, flat surfaces, sort of like a hyper technical Vegas with like lots of light and also pretty crowded and room to blah blah blah. But it's so much closer to being Los Angeles noir than it is to anything other than that.
Well, I think so. I think living in America, we have a very sort of skewed perception of like what futuristic is. Because I remember like the first time I was like, I'd been in like London before. Like London's old as shit. Like there's nothing modern about London. But then I remember when we went over to the Netherlands for work, and they had like a modern like highway system. I'm like, oh, like it doesn't have to be all broken like it is in America. Like they can fix it. Like there's ways that you can like they just know how to do things better. Like that felt modern in a way that like being here, where like every highway in New Jersey is always under construction and it all just sucks and it's overcrowded.
Well, I think they're very often less involved in the eternal conflict of like paying for infrastructure, because they're just like, the citizens accept that we have to do this. They're not always going to fight us on every fucking thing about this and like literally vote us out of office because we want to fix bridges.
But I've not been to, I feel like going to Japan, or especially like maybe in the I don't know, like it just feels like, oh, this is like a new world. And like, I want to set things here because it feels like this is like when the thing happens, it will be here because everything seems like it'll be here first.
And also that's where maybe also this probably has something to do with it. Like there are a lot of like corporations that are like building computers and stuff there. So a lot of their like just stuff. The stuff that they're into is actually coming from Japan, right?
I think that they both are cool depending on your perspective. But I just think that like going back to like Kurosawa films, like samurai swords are fucking cool.
Yeah.
And like Western like gunslingers can be cool too. But it feels like maybe as an American or Canadian or
Canadian
Westerner writing this, you grow up like watching a million Westerns. Like I'm tired of like 6-shooters. Like I want to see samurai swords.
You were not like, you were basically not conscious in the 80s, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So like the 80s and some of the 90s, but like ninjas were the fucking coolest thing in the world.
They still kind of are.
Yeah, but I don't know if like, are little boys into ninjas anymore? Like we had like the American Ninja movies.
They're more into Ninja, the Twitch streamer. Do you know Ninja?
No, I don't know about that stuff.
Okay.
Wait, hold on. Let me say something that maybe it's true, maybe it's not. FaZe Clan?
I have no idea.
Okay. I think that's got something to do with Twitch streaming.
Sure.
Or Ninja from
The Antword?
Yeah.
Chappie?
Chappie. That's a cyberpunk movie. We should watch Chappie in conjunction with this.
Yeah.
I kind of have a soft spot for Chappie. I think that movie's
Chappie's cool.
I think that movie's way better than people gave it credit. It's way better than Elysium. That movie sucked.
Yeah. Well, Elysium is one of those where it's just like, oh, I get it. Like, it's just the rich people are up there and we're down here.
Yeah.
And, like, there's no metaphor. It's just like they think they're better than us.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you watch, like, Alita Battle Angel, which is the same thing. It's like, but this is cool. Like, I understand this.
Yeah. And Chappie's cool because frankly, it's because the Antword are fucking so weird. That's just like, this is like, it's fascinating to like have a cyber intelligence, like learning how to be human from people like that.
I love it.
Yeah. Another thing that's interesting about this book is like, if you look at the original cover of it, do you know what the original cover looks like? It's probably on the Wikipedia.
Can I Google it?
Go ahead and Google it. We'll break the rules for this. But it's like that grid.
Oh yeah, I've seen this.
You know, it's like the grid thing that like now is recycled in a lot of things that are on Instagram and stuff like that, which are like chill wave aesthetics and things like that, where it's just like, very digital representations of sunsets and like sort of like early video games representations of like indoors, where it's like all like green lines creating a cube that you can stand in. And there's something about that has like, at one point it was cutting edge, and then it like rotated out to where it looked really cheesy, to where like, I think if you look at something like Tron now, it kind of looks pretty cheesy. But then it like looped back around to being retro in a way that is really cool.
Yeah.
The same way that like now, and I think that the TV show Halt and Catch Fire capitalized on this a lot. Like it looped around to where like now the aesthetic of like those old Macs and
cool again.
floppy disks and things like that, it's like seems almost alien because it, like the technology that existed before then, cars and airplanes,
still looks the same.
Like, yeah, it basically hasn't changed at all. But like computer technology is completely different looking, and so all that retro stuff looks like it's from another planet.
And I think he gets a lot of that stuff right. I did write down one point, like he said, like 3 megabytes of RAM, and I'm like, okay. Like there's some things where I'm just like, you're not even in the ballpark of what the RAM would take to like whatever.
Oh yeah, because you'd have to be like 900 terabytes.
Because like standard on like a $400 laptop is now like 8 gigs. It's just like, and that's like, okay, so like that's the baseline of like, to use anything you need that, and this is 3 megabytes, whatever. But I do think that a lot of the like tech sort of future looking, like the bodily enhancements and stuff, like I think he gets in a way that feels like it's not here yet, but it's coming.
Oh yeah, like the idea, I mean, you have like people that are doing body modification stuff for aesthetics in a way that it's like the next thing is utilitarian, right? Because like you have all of the piercings and like those people that put like the nodules in their skulls to represent horns and stuff like that, and like the next thing may as well be like Wolverine claws or some shit like that, or like retractable
Razor Girls IRL,
or like an Allen wrench that comes out of your kneecap for some reason. Like it feels like that stuff is like, not that far away as we get better at surgery and stuff like that.
I think that's like, I think the two elements of that, and I realize I sort of like steered away, but I think the whole like what's old is new again, or at least newly relevant or cool again, and that like I think that the things he's capitalizing on feel modern because it's modern again, and also feel modern because like it's coming in the near future, and it's I mean, it's almost 40 years old.
Yeah, that's wild because it's still like it still feels like the future. The same way that in a lot of ways Back to the Future too feels like the future. And I wonder if that's because the future didn't get here quite as quickly as we thought it would, or the future that we imagined is just completely different. Because there's technology that we have now that, like in Back to the Future 2, like they don't have cell phones, for example, in that, or if they do, they certainly don't have smartphones or whatever.
But I think also what's interesting about that is that like people want hoverboards. I don't think because they're practical, but they're because they were in Back to the Future too. Like we're developing toward technology that like we don't need hoverboards. That's not going to help anything in any. You know what I mean?
Other than being cool.
Other than like, oh, Marty rode one in 1987 or whatever the movie, 89, 90, whenever the movie came out. I want to do that too. It's like, okay.
It's like that line in what is the name of the movie? Richard Kelly's second movie, Southland Tales, where Sarah Michelle Gellar just goes, scientists are now saying that the future is going to be far more futuristic than they thought.
I think another thing that really fascinates me about this, in a way that, because of the way that the work that I do on a day-to-day basis, but like, I think more so than although Snow Crash is also like literally the title is this. I think that this is really fascinating in the way that it weaponizes tech, that people are using technology both to like enhance things, but also just like, hey, yeah, we fixed your body from all the drugs you did, but like if you fuck us over, like we're going to literally poison you because like we have the technology and you, like we put these like poison sacks. And, like there's all these different ways that people are using and abusing and taking advantage of different tech in a way to exhibit control, which that is kind of like what all tech companies do now anyway. And I felt like it was very interesting. It felt, again, prescient.
Yeah, well, I think the thing about like techno libertarians or whatever is I don't know that they're naive or that they think that it's or if they're just trying to hold on to whatever freedom or whatever that they have and think that the internet is the best way to do it. But it's like a dream. It is a naive dream to believe that technology will not fall into the hands of coercive power structures. Like that's exactly. First of all, like technology is like, especially elite technology, is only really accessible first by coercive power structures. People who have a ton of money and people who have like a ton of corporate interests, right? Like you're not you can be the best hacker in the world, but you're not Google,
right?
You don't have the reach of Google. You might be. I mean, you see Anonymous doing collective action stuff that tries to counteract this, but it's like ultimately, every time Anonymous does something, it's just like. People talk about it for like 2 days and then they...
I think this is also, we probably talked about this with Snow Crash, but like that was the idea of Web3. It's like all these, like like we were just talking about the other day, like 5 companies have everything. We're going to decentralize it so that nobody owns anything. And then all these companies with centralized power and like a trusted authority, we're going to do a Web3 thing. It's like, well, you don't have to do a Web3 thing because like, why you would, it almost hurts you to do it. Like you would just do like, your own kind of thing. Like it's this promise of like it's in the people's hands, but it might never be, or it might be eventually. I don't know. It just feels like this idea of individuals having the power is always going to exist and is never going to actually happen.
And you know, I think like this is thematic to the book too, obviously, but these like independent agencies or independent agencies or independent actors that are attempting to influence all of this stuff also are unaware of who they're acting on behalf of, right?
Sure.
And this is something that we see on you know, as the internet's gotten much more confusing over the past 5 to 10 years, especially because now because of propaganda, whether it be regardless of the political party that's doing the propaganda, like almost everything now, so people are just like, oh, that's like a bot. That's or like someone says something unbelievably shitty and they're just like, oh, I was hacked. That wasn't me that said that.
What's funny to me is the scary part about that is when it's done well, and it's like, oh, I'm not sure. Or like today. At Lottery Pod on Twitter, we were followed by Jimmy at Jimmy 0300165881. His bio is, I'm from New York, USA. Nice to meet you. It's like, you're not like, you're not even trying.
Yeah.
So like there are things, it's funny to see like that. You're like, oh, we're fine. It's going to be fine.
Love the numbers, Jimmy. Keep them coming.
Keep them coming. And then you're like, oh, that's actually a bot, or like it's, or, you know, whatever. It's just like, oh, there's, it's almost like in editing or whatever. It's like, if you notice it, they're doing a bad job. But it's like when things, like when technology is like working, all firing on all cylinders or whatever, it's like, oh, that's scary because I didn't know that's actually what was going on, or like who created that, or why they created that, or what they're gaining from it. Mm-hmm. I also think that like when you have someone who's trying to like buck the system or whatever, right? Like an Elon Musk who's like, I'm going to turn the car industry on. Like he probably he's got to be inherited wealth, right? Like he's on a self.
Elon Musk, he's the son of gem miners from South Africa.
Right. Okay. Yes. So he had money, but he's just like, I'm going to do this thing. Like he was like one man against the system, and now he is the system. Like it's like this, you know, eventually you become the thing that you're fighting against. Yeah.
I mean, this, like, there's an old refrain about that. Like, you know, the newer way of saying it is that you either die young,
the Batman thing,
or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Yeah, the Harvey Dent thing.
Yeah, or you have that shit that like my parents used to say to me when I was a kid, and like really like protesting the Iraq War hard, which they would be like act like I was being naive because I didn't want there to be war, but they would be like, if you're not a liberal when you're young, you have no heart, but if you're not a conservative when you're older, it's because you have no head. And it's like the idea, of course, is like they're trying to say that you, as you like mature, you become less naive and you see how the world works, and then you start voting with interests over things like taxes and shit like that, where you're like more concerned about saving money, as opposed to like voting for moral reasons. But I don't know how I got on this topic.
Oh, this is a weird episode, man.
Yeah,
but so the idea of that is that you're optimistic and you're like, we should help everybody. Then you like see how the world really works. It's like, well, I got to help myself.
Yeah, that's their idea. As I've gotten older, I've moved further and further left. So
I think that's a way for people to.
Maybe I'm just getting stupider and stupider.
Very possible. Just listen to these episodes. But I think that's a way for people to validate or justify their actions. It's just like, oh no, man, like you'll see. Eventually, you'll see the way the world really works.
Yeah, it's condescending, and it's the sort of condescending shit people put on young people to invalidate their opinions about politics, right? Mm-hmm.
Oh, you'll know better one day.
Yeah.
Like, how old is Case? Case is like mid-20s, I think.
Oh, is he mid-20s? I was picturing him as being older, mostly because he's like.
Oh, Case was 24. At 22, he'd been a cowboy, wrestler. Blah, blah,
yeah,
blah, blah,
I was in my head. I was picturing him as like 38, 40.
Were you picturing? So, like, I don't have answers to this, but were you picturing anybody like because this has been adapted in all sorts of things. They kept trying to get movies turned into things, but were you picturing people as any of these characters or no?
It's hard because. In my head, the dream version of this movie is the Chris Cunningham version.
Well, so you know about that one
of it, yeah. Because I'm like I'm a Chris Cunningham guy. Like he's my guy.
Do you know about the other ones or no?
Vincenzo Natali did one, right? Or wanted to do one, mm-hmm. and that fell through. But like to me, it's like Cunningham. If you don't know who Chris Cunningham is one of the most visionary music video directors, and he did like, for example, he's been ripped off by everyone. Mm-hmm. Like he did in the All Is Full of Love video for Bjork, which is like Bjork has two robots who are making out. Like that robot design was very clearly ripped off by the Will Smith iRobot movie. And like he's just like a really, really great visual artist. The thing about him making a movie is that I have no idea how he'd do with any kind of narrative.
Well, so that's the thing. So very quickly, it was first adapted into a graphic novel that got canceled or something after 2 issues. Some hypertext version of this, an old like Apple II, Mac II PC game, a radio play, and an opera. It seemed like the first film version of this was going to be the Chris Cunningham one with a soundtrack by Aphex Twin.
Yeah, that's like the platonic ideal of this for me.
But I feel like the one that came after that, which again, this is now still 15 years ago because it's May 2007, but Joseph Kahn, who did Torque before this.
Yeah, no thank you.
But he also did, I love him, he also did Detention, which is great. He did Bodied, which is great. But he's also predominantly a music video guy. Mm-hmm. Like he did I don't know if he still does because I think she does her own now, but like almost all of Taylor Swift's like billion view videos were him. Like he's generated so many, like he's billions and billions of plays, and he's like a
the only Taylor Swift video that I can picture in my head is Bad Blood. Did you do that one?
I want to say yes, but I'm not going to
probably because that's like a cyberpunk ass video.
And so the reason I bring that up, the reason I sort of cut you off in terms of the narrative thing, is because Joseph Kahn came from music videos. So did Daniels, who did Swiss Army Man and now Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I feel like,
oh, they're the guys that you'd want to do it.
Well, no, I think that to a certain extent, it's just like I don't know how you translate, like how do you maintain the energy of a 4-minute thing with just like the craziest thing you've ever seen in your life into a 90-minute thing. And these people have pretty successfully been able to do it.
Well, here's what I'll say about that. This book is essentially a series of high-tech, like, Mission Impossible missions.
Yeah.
It's like just like one after another of like them trying to do this thing.
And I'm sort of surprised. It also feels, I think, other than being John Malkovich, I feel like nothing has really tapped into the way of like Case being in Molly's
This is something
head.
that I want to talk about too, because I think it's go ahead, yeah.
But I think so. Just very quickly, Joseph Kahn was going to do it, I think, with Mila Jovovich as probably as Molly. In May 2007, so that's, peak sort of, I mean, she's still around. Then Vincenzo Natali, they had offered to Liam Neeson and Mark Wahlberg. It doesn't seem like either accepted.
Both those are terrible castings.
Well, yeah. Even though you love Mark Wahlberg. That sounds like a joke, but we both like Mark. He's good.
He's good when he's playing someone that's like really dumb. There's like maybe 5 movies that Mark Wahlberg has been like incredible in, and then I would throw the rest of his filmography
Pain
out.
and Gain?
No.
You don't like Pain and Gain?
I don't like Pain and Gain.
Okay. That was in August 2012, and then 5 years ago, so it seems like every 5 years they try to get it going. Tim Miller, the guy who did Deadpool.
Yeah, see, this is all bad to me.
So at one point, I think maybe I think it was Vincenzo Natali said, "Oh, there's been a script done for years," but it feels like for whatever reason they never get past even like initial casting. They just have an idea for like, oh yeah, that person should be. So did you have anybody in mind, or Chris Cunningham as the director?
Well, I think Chris Cunningham is William Gibson's choice.
Okay.
To make this into a movie. I was having a hard time. I thought initially Charlize Theron as Molly, and I think that might be because Ion Flux is very clearly Molly, right? That's Molly Million. Like she's very clearly based on Molly, or feels like she is. I don't know. Ion Flux may be a manga that predates this even. I'm not sure.
Ion Flux was the MTV series,
Liquid Television, but I don't know, that might be adapted from.
Do you know where Molly Millions is from originally?
No.
Johnny Mnemonic.
Which
became the Keanu.
But that's also William Gibson, right?
Yeah. He wrote it as like a short story or whatever. I'm saying that like I've known this for years. I learned it this morning.
Yeah. No, I knew that.
But I don't know if she's in that movie. She might be. I've seen that movie once. There's apparently like a Japanese cut that is like great of Johnny Mnemonic. But
I love that movie when it came out when I was a kid.
It's insane. It's weird.
Yeah. The same way that I liked is it called Virtua Cop? The Denzel Washington
Virtuosity? Virtua Cop is the Sega Saturn arcade.
All right, yeah. Okay, I remember Virtua Cop too. But Virtuosity, I loved that movie when it came out.
Because there's Virtuosity, and what's the other one that's like that? It's maybe another Denzel with Russell Crowe?
No, that's Virtuosity.
What's the
Virtuosity is the one with Russell Crowe.
Okay.
That's all in this will. That's all like Neuromancer is the blueprint for all of that stuff.
Yeah. I still think that they could probably, because it feels like this book was not a hit when it came out. It struck a cultural nerve according to Wiki, but like people didn't read it. It took like the New York Times 10 years to even mention it.
Wow.
Like it was an underground hit, word of mouth thing, but I feel like it was probably more popular at some point than it is now. But I feel like you could still make it now and people would be like, holy shit, they're making a Neuromancer movie.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's like, the thing is that when they do ultimately make the movie, it's going to suck because it's because it's been through all of these things. And the reason why nobody can get it right is because they're overthinking it, probably being too precious with the material. What we should get, and again, not to harp on Chris Cunningham, but it's like, forget the fucking plot. Don't worry about making people understand it. Just fucking blitz us with awesome visuals for 90 minutes. Like the mistake version of this movie is something that is like front loaded with a ton of exposition and is like
lots of voiceover and stuff, right?
Yeah, we don't get away from that. Just give us like this world where like there's a kind of mob. We have a detective. It's like noir aesthetics. with lots of like cool robot and body mod stuff, techno music, fluorescence, flickering lights, and don't sweat the story so much.
But I feel like that would never get made because people are like, nobody understands this.
Right. Yeah. I think that's
Like,
true.
you need, like-
that's probably why it hasn't gotten made, because
would-
I think every draft of this screenplay, people have probably been like, I have no idea what this movie's about.
You would need someone like an A24, but I think they're even probably too big. Where they need to be like, you need like a somebody with money, like an independent producer, to be like, we trust you, make the thing you want to make.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, the other reason why Chris Cunningham's stuff doesn't get made is because I think he's too like auteur. I don't think he, like, supposedly Aphex Twin was Aphex Twin did an interview about this where he was like, Chris Cunningham made a zombie movie on his own, completely self-funded, made a zombie movie.
Did it ever come out?
No, because he made that movie completely on his own, and then like a bunch of other zombie movies came out, and Chris Cunningham was just like, I'm not being part of a trend, and he just like put the movie in his pocket and was just like, I'm not doing anything with this. So I think he's like a guy that, like, about his art is just totally like, it has to be 1000% on my terms.
I need to be the one who does
or I'm not doing
yeah.
anything. Like, I'm not doing anything that I don't want to do.
I feel like if this were made today, I think the obvious, but maybe not, but it just feels like because he's the only one doing this, is like Villeneuve.
Oh yeah, right. He would be the choice, but also
because he's like the only one consistently making visual sci-fi.
Yeah, and he's already adapted
Dune.
It's like a story that people thought was impossible to adapt, which he hasn't done yet. He did half of it. Like, you can't say that he did like a successful adaptation of Dune, because that's like he did half of a movie. That's not a full movie yet. I mean, I liked it. I thought it was even like, I'm watching it and I'm just like, I don't know, this is not really a story, but like all of the like visuals are still
amazing,
stunning. Yeah,
and I think that's the thing. Like, I think I would understand this more if I like. Again, this is I'm not dumb, but I feel like sometimes when I read things, I just can't, like, I think the issue that I have with this is the issue that I have with a lot of things, and also like watching sci-fi too. It's just like, if I miss one thing, I don't go back and reread it. I just keep going, and then like it's like compound interest where I'm just like, oh, I don't understand like any of this now because I missed a thing earlier. Or like in a sci-fi series, it's like, the world's too big now. I can't track everything.
Yeah,
and I feel like the first, and it's not sci-fi at all, but when I read Inherent Vice, I was like, I don't know what this is about, and I think part of that is because
it is kind of sci-fi,
I guess. Oh yeah, the house is bigger on the outside.
Yeah, the zomes are sci-fi.
But again, that's a noir story.
Yeah, right. Because the two genres are too. So,
but I read that and I'm just like, I don't know what the fuck this is about, and I feel like part of it is just like it's not really about anything. Like, it's kind of like about the futility of everything or whatever. Like, that's how I sort of.
Inherent Vice.
Yeah. Somewhat.
We can have a conversation off air about what Inherent Vice is about.
But then I saw the movie and I was like, oh, I get it now.
You get it, yeah.
And I feel like the same thing with Dune. Like, Dune is also, like, I think much more, it's not more difficult than Inherent Vice, but it's like long as sci-fi. It's, again, that's not a thing that I was.
It's more boring than Inherent Vice is.
I was also.
It's a boring book.
Yeah. I was also reading it explicitly to watch the movie, and I'm like, I didn't really want to read it. Mm-hmm. And then I saw the movie, I was like, oh, no, I get it now. And I feel like if Neuromancer, if I saw a version that was incomprehensible, I would be like, oh, I get it. Like, even if, like, I don't understand the movie on its own, I don't understand the book on its own, doing the two together, I would be like, oh, no, I get it now.
Shakespeare is like this, right? Like, if you read Shakespeare, you can just be like, I don't understand any of these. This is so incomprehensible. Like, these metaphors are so, like, alien, and some of these words, I just, like, have no idea what they are. But, like, then you go and watch a play, you like, watch it on stage, and the people are speaking the exact same words, but you're just like, I get it, because now I have, like, this visual representation of a thing.
The reason I brought up all of the adaptation stuff was because I looked on there's like that casting website or whatever. I'm just like, I need to like hone in on something. Like, I know who Case is. I know who Molly is. I think I know who Armitage is, even though, like, turns out you don't know who Armitage is because it's like a whole thing.
That's kind of the whole point.
But like, there's a handful of things I'm just like, okay, I can like lock in on this, but I'm like, I need to visualize something. And so there's like this casting, like a crowd, like a wiki, a Reddit style, like upvoting, downvoting. And the person they had for Case was Gosling. And I'm like, great, but he's way too old now.
He's also... He also already did Blade Runner 2049.
I think this is probably before then. But yeah, but like, it's also Blade Runner 2049. It's The Nice Guys. It's that new thing, Memory. Like, it's all these... He does play like a really bedraggled detective really well.
Yeah, Pattinson would be good, maybe.
Sure. But then all the other people, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm not going to look it up again. But okay, so let's talk about the being John Malkovich sort of thing.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was really interesting from like there's something really fascinating about that from like a gender perspective, and like the idea of like plugging this guy into a woman's body, because there is the scene when the very first time that he does it, she like pinches her own nipple, and his like body like bucks, like he gets like weak in the knees because he's like not used to that specific feeling, and so like there is something about like the transition between bodies that is like really fascinating, and then that ends up being like a significant chunk of this book, especially in the back end, ends up being like sort of unclear about what body is the real body versus what body is like the digital body, and to the point where like it actually ends with that, where he's like, I saw another version of myself, like maybe what Wintermute or like the combined version of Wintermute and Neuromancer has like uploaded a version of Case to the cyberspace so that he could like.
Well, so are there like how many different locations are there? There's like the real world. Mm-hmm. There's cyberspace, which he jacks into. He then flips into like flipping is going into Molly's consciousness, I think. But then there's also like that other cyberspace that Wintermute kind of traps him in.
The one that's like in my head, I was thinking of it as like, for some reason, the United Arab Emirates. Like it felt real like this is like, you know how like in the UAE there's like, it's like this space in the desert, but they have like ski slopes and stuff, and it just seems like completely unreal.
Oh, like how in New Jersey there's Xanadu.
I don't know about that.
You don't remember like the Meadowlands that they built an indoor ski slope?
No.
It's just like, why? And I don't think anything ever opened, but they spent like millions of dollars on this thing, and just like, oh,
yeah,
we don't need that.
But so the UAE has all that money.
Sure.
So they've like created this like, and they want to do Neom. Like, do you know about Neom?
Mm-mm.
Oh, that's weird. That seems like something that you and in your work you guys would have talked about. Neom is like supposed to be like the city of the future that the well, that might be Saudi Arabia, not the United Arab Emirates, but it's like this like city of the future that's meant to be like this digital like just paradise of like, you know, urban planning, and the thing is like this is all in a place where it's like you like costs a rainforest to make this kind of energy in this place,
right? But
like they happen to also be the richest people in the world, so they can do it. But it's like, I don't know. So I was thinking of this digital thing as being like reminiscent of this kind of oasis, because they see it is kind of an oasis, right?
It seemed, well, you're talking about the thing where like his murdered ex-girlfriend is like around, right? Like it's like a kind of a paradise.
Yeah.
And he's just like, it takes a while, I think, to realize where he is and what's going on, and that's where the little boy Neuromancer is just hanging out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's a separate space, and I think that's like where maybe he not ends up, but like maybe the last scene is like in that.
Well, what is he meets those two people and they like get him high, right? Or is this a different part of the book?
I don't know. Well, so he's a junkie who gets clean, and then they have to get him high. They're like, oh, we can still get you high. Like his new body's just like, you can't get high. Like you can take all the drugs and it doesn't do anything. And like there's new drugs that gets him high or whatever. And I think that's maybe how they trap him. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's very, it gets to be very confusing.
But I think that other than being John Malkovich, the whole like coexisting within a single consciousness where you're both aware, and I don't know that that's necessarily like the whole thing of being John Malkovich is like he doesn't know that somebody's in his body. He's just living his own life, and like they're living in there with him. I don't know, but like it feels like that's a thing that I've not seen elsewhere.
Yeah, and that movie ends in like a real horror thing where it's like they're trapped, right?
Well, so spoilers to the end of being John Malkovich, which we just did on 1999 on the podcast, if you want to go listen to that. John Cusack finds a way to stay in the consciousness. You're supposed to, like a 15-minute window or whatever. He figures out how to stay there. He becomes the world's most famous puppeteer. Puppeteer becomes whatever. But there's this whole group of people who want to basically, like every generation, they're able to like live forever by all inhabiting this vessel. And so like they get trapped in there, but like by design, like they want to keep living forever.
But it ends with them in the kid's head, right? Like you have the person she's getting out of the
they're looking at that she's going to be the next vessel or whatever. Yes.
You know what's the weirdest part of that movie is the like fucking very strange monkeys point of view stuff. Like what is that?
That movie rules.
That's so bizarre.
Let's read Meg's email. We have an email address, lotterypod@cageclub.me, or just lottery@cageclub.me. We'll see what Egg says. Meg's reaction to Neuromancer. I didn't really like Neuromancer, but I can appreciate the cultural significance. I tried reading this book before it was a part of the podcast, but I couldn't get into it. This time around, I listened to the audiobook, which I think was maybe read by William Gibson.
Oh, really?
He read a version of it. I don't know if it's the one that she read, or listened to. But my brain was like a sieve, and I felt I only remember bits and pieces of the book. I'm excited to listen to the episode so I can see what went over my head. Well, sorry. Sorry, Egg.
Yeah, we did very little in the way of plot. But I think, like, again, like with the exception of some books, plot is like the last thing that I'm thinking about, usually, with regards to these themes. Sometimes with, like, crime novels, plot is really important to me. And plot is what I'm interested in because it's like, I like the very, like, you know, the satisfying click of the Legos being put together into something that makes a shape, which is like what plot is, right? But for the most part, I'm way more interested in imagistic concerns or like emotional flashpoints.
Uh-huh.
Like when I watch a movie, I can rarely ever tell you what the entire plot is, except for like a bare bones thing, but I can tell you like a scene that really moved me or something that I thought was like really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know, like as far as the imagistic stuff, when we first started reading this book, and you text messaged me and you were like, I just read the first 20 pages and I have no idea what's going on, and I was just like plucking out bits that I thought were like specifically really good writing, right? And I think specific really good writing, because it sets the scene, is the very first line of the book, which is the sky above the port was the color of television tuned to a dead channel. And the reason why I think that is really good and a really good introductory line to a book like this is that it immediately sets us in the world, not only by like telling us, you know, describing the setting, but like in the metaphor that it uses, because it tells us that like the concerns of the people in this world are tech related, and they're now using technology as a metaphor for nature, rather than nature being used metaphorically for humans, right? So when you talk about like the romance poets and things like that, like Percy Shelley or whoever, or even the metaphysical poets like John Donne, like they're using nature to describe human concerns. So like to move away from nature toward technology to describe as a metaphor, like shows like a human, like an isolation from real things and a movement toward things that are constructed. And there's something about that like sets the entire tone for the book for me. That's like anti-romantic version of a future.
In a single line.
In a single line, yeah. And then the other line that really, I think this is like, these are maybe like the two most famous lines from the book, and there's good reason that there's two most famous lines in the book. But the other line is like, back in the darkness, something made wet sounds and died, which is like so gross, but also like you can hear it so specifically, like, you know, like what the like biological sounds of a sucking wound or something, like you know what that sounds like. And there's something so like, something made wet sounds and died, like you can't see the thing dying because it's in darkness, but like you can hear life leaving something through like this like gross liquidy and anyway, like I think William Gibson is like a really great writer. It's just that I don't think his concerns are the same as our concerns. He's not concerned with you understanding his book at all.
And I think that's so I realized as I was finishing this book, I like plot, but I'm more character.
Yeah.
And I think to a certain extent, I'm also sure compared to other sci-fi, these characters are much more well-rounded.
Right, yeah.
Because I think a lot of sci-fi is just like, look at all this cool shit. But at the same time, the characters don't really matter. It's just like, it's the mood, it's the space, it's the place.
I mean, not to harp on the Raymond Chandler stuff, but they're drawn from such archetypes that like you can basically just like, you know, it's paint by numbers.
Right, exactly.
Them.
And I think, so I'm like, I'm not getting emotional arc here. It's just like, former drug addict reformed, gets a second chance, relapses, haunted by his past. It's like, yeah, okay, cool, got it.
Yeah.
I've seen that. I've literally seen that movie 1,000 times. The visuals are cool. But I think the plot matters because like that's what he's doing it for. But also kind of frustrating, and I think that's the point again, is the noir thing where it's like the plot doesn't matter because like the plot as you understand it is not actually the plot. And so when this book is having you follow a plot and then it pulls the rug out from
under you, which it could do at any minute and does multiple times, where it's just like everything that I told you from the first 100 pages, like just forget, that's not real. Forget it. We're doing something else now.
And I totally see the appeal, and like in past times in my life, like fantasy video games, fantasy movies, and whatever, like there's something very appealing about just like exploring a brand new world where like nothing is like everything is kind of like what you expect, but like everything's different. I'm, at least right now, no interest in that.
How are you? I would say after Snow Crash and then this, which are maybe the two most highly regarded cyberpunk novels, I'm like basically finished with cyberpunk stuff for a while.
I think what I want is just I want like the story of my life. I just want like a girl like fucking up in New York or whatever. Like that's just more interesting to me.
It's interesting to juxtapose this with like, because a lot of the stuff that we've done this module like has been the internet, obviously, but it's also like how the internet like exposes very, very human parts of us in like a broad way, whether it be through Live Blog, which was the last actual one that we talked about, regardless of whether or not
came out like 2 months ago. But yes,
like if you put that book next to this book, it's like they couldn't possibly be more different, right? But they're both equally about the internet. It's just that one is like concerned with human things and the other one's concerned with like the machinations of
well, I think that's why this season also, or this module, whatever you want to call it, is interesting. It's like, because it kind of yo-yos you around. Like, you know, when I'm planning seasons for Too Fast, Too Forever, it's like, okay, we can do like the movies of Vin Diesel or like car chase movies or whatever. And like, there's many, many more good car chase movies because there's been hundreds of them, as opposed to Vin Diesel's like 40 movies or whatever. But like, there's something kind of exciting about the Vin Diesel, just like, oh, he's in like 8 wildly different movies or whatever, and the car chase is like, you kind of know what you're going to get. And I think when you do like a campus season, unless you have Giles Goat Boy or whatever,
I tried to throw some wrenches in there.
You kind of know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you make that? And I think it's not better or worse. It's like, how do you make that interesting? It's like, we've read 100 stories about a college freshman or whatever. What sets yours apart or whatever. It's the car chase is like, well, what are you going to do to like separate from the other 100 movies that came out in the 70s that are the same exact thing? And I think they both have merit. They both have value. And I think sort of balancing between the two is interesting because like our next season, I guess 2 seasons from now, because we got a special in between thing, which we'll get to, but like, it's going to be another one like this, where it's like, it could literally be anything because the theme is like, is almost unthemed in a way, but I think there's value in, I think, both sides. I think it makes it hard to compare this to like a live blog, but I think overarchingly, the internet focus is interesting.
Well, because
in a way, my final thought is that live blog almost couldn't exist if he didn't describe the internet the way he did. Because like way he just like that's probably not true, but that's at least partially true. That his depiction of the internet from 30 years before Megan Boyle decided to live blog her entire life for 6 months, the way he's describing things, people then built on it. And like, I know everything is additive and all, but just like, it's weird. Like they are disconnected, but also directly connected through the literal building of the internet.
Yeah, and I was down on even doing Neuromancer like for a while.
This is my request.
Yeah, but then also you like right before we got into it, you were like, we can just not do Neuromancer if you don't want to. But like, I'm glad that we did, because it is like these books, this and Snow Crash, are like important to how we have conceived of both the internet and also like what online aesthetics are
Sure.
now, because like I said, like all like there's so many things on Instagram and stuff where it seems like their entire brand is based on things that William Gibson described or Neil Stephenson described. So I think all of that is, really
It's worth exploring.
for sure. Even though like I said, I think I'm gonna take a break from Cyberpunk for a little while.
I guess we're not going to do it. So next season, not Cyberpunk.
Well, there's some.
Are there others that are like this of this magnitude? I'm sure there are.
Oh yeah, like I said, like there's I could make a list. I was thinking of Outer Space as a module, but I don't know. I haven't thought of that. But yeah, there's a lot of that, like Philip K. Dick. Yeah, like stuff like "Flow My Tears," the policeman said, or
oh sure, yeah, okay, yeah,
or the Scanner Darkly is
okay.
That for sure. The Werner Vinge, or the Shockwave Rider is the book that I was trying to think of earlier.
From the author that I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Shockwave Rider, True Names. These are things that like are in this wheelhouse that are like interesting. I would say are like idea heavy rather than like writing heavy. So like if you're reading fiction for the like broader ideas about humanity rather than reading fiction for like the aesthetics, then like they're probably more important to you, which I think is generally what people who love science fiction are into reading for. They're not so much into the poetic language or character or atmosphere. They're mostly into it for like, I want to know how like magnets work or some shit.
Just like the Insane Clown Posse.
Yeah.
People read Cyberpunk to learn how magnets work.
Yeah. I'm going to say that today's crime is tax evasion.
Egg still has more of her email.
Oh, shit. You fucked me up, Meg. I can't believe that we departed that long from Meg's email.
Well, she ended the first paragraph by saying, "I'm excited to listen to the episode so I can see what went over my head, and I apologize that we just went off on a tangent."
Yeah.
The scene that I like best, and I knew you were ramping up to the crime, eggs saved by the egg. The scene I liked best was when Wintermute first tried to get in contact with Case, and the hallway of phones rang once he passed them.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's some serious
conspiracy.
Yeah, like very, very paranoid. Yeah, I love that. I'm glad Meg brought that up, because that's something that is like I can imagine thinking of that scene, like as a writer, I can imagine thinking of that scene and then being like, I got to find a way to make that work, and then like developing this whole thing around like a cool thing like that.
I also liked Molly as a character in general, but a couple of scenes were annoying, most prominent being when she was choking 3 Jane, and 3 Jane was into it in a sexual way.
Well, these people are perverts, and that's just the way it is.
There is certain, again, like at least there's no 15-year-old girl that we're fetishizing here, but like the way that they describe sex, I'm just like, we don't need this. Like I get it, but it's just like, hey dudes.
Yeah.
You want to get off while you're...
I like Molly too, though. 'Cause I like Molly in a very like, she satisfies like a very adolescent boy who enjoyed the X-Men. Like kind of character. Like she's got like finger claws, and she's like she like breaks her leg, but she's just like, no big deal. Like keeps like just like numbs it and like keeps moving on. Has like these like cool dart guns. Like she's very much like Psylocke or a Mystique or like other cool X-Men characters that I, when I was a little kid, I loved.
All in all, Meg says, not my favorite book that we've read this season. Weirdly, she says keep reading.
She does not.
She does not say keep reading.
You absolute. Yeah, all right. Well, I think I said tax evasion was the crime, right?
I didn't even hear because I was so excited. I'm just like, wait, we've got more to talk about.
All right.
Oh, actually, I do have one other note, and I feel like it was fascinating when I don't remember. Was it maybe? Who is the one? Was it Linda Lee who tells the story about being like a prostitute? There's a part where there's like this, like he like goes underground to find someone. I don't remember. Like at a certain point, I'm just like, I don't know who these characters are. Like I know the characters, but whatever. But there was something very Severance-y about the way that she was able to literally escape her mind to escape trauma.
Yeah.
And I felt like, because then she would like come back to it. And I feel like the Severance thing, like there's been a lot over the last couple of years, the Rick and Morty episode, Severance, a couple things where it's just like the separation, not of church and state, but of like waking and living or working and living or whatever. And I felt like this was that same kind of thing. It's just like my body needs to be here. I'm in slavery or like whatever. I'm being used. I'm being abused. People are literally, my body is being farmed out to have people have sex with.
Yeah.
But I'm able to escape through somewhat of like a severance kind of like just like jacking out or whatever. And then she comes back and like fights back or whatever. But I thought that was a very, I don't know if that this influenced Severance at all, but it feels like it's the same kind of like separating so that like you can, the things you don't want to be a part of, like also just disassociative, whatever. But I thought, you know, in the sci-fi realm.
Yeah, there's also that scene where Case is in, he like jacks into Molly's consciousness, and then like he sees Molly observing him, and he's like a junkie with like a beard. He's like kind of shaking in a corner. And it's like that stuff is confusing to me, but I'm kind of like I like the idea of like how many of this guy is there, like, and how is it like this loop of things. But again, I'm viewing that from the point of view of someone who at that point didn't really understand exactly what was going on in the book. So for me, it's like a lot of this exists as like a dream.
And I genuinely wonder if William Gibson would be upset if we're like, we don't understand. Like, I think to a certain extent, whether he's going to admit it or not, I think part of it is just like, I don't want you to. I want you to get lost in it.
Yeah, which is like, you know, the reason why that works in noir is because like the characters in the noir are also confused.
Yep.
And like at the end, you also might not be able to understand. Like there's a thing with I forget what Raymond Chandler story it is, but when they were making the movie, they were writing the screenplay and they called him and they were just like, who killed this person? Like from reading the book, they couldn't figure out who killed the person. And then I think Raymond Chandler was like, I don't know, let me check. And then like he went back and he reread it and he called them back and was just like, I don't know. and so like, cause like, it's not about that. It's about like sometimes you're not going to know, you're not going to be able to figure it out. So it's more about like, this scary part of the world where it's like, you know what? There aren't really answers. You like sometimes people get killed and you never figure out who did it.
Yeah. Which I think that's why, like, I don't know that I want to, because this is not my cup of tea, but I feel like this is, again, another one that rewards rereading.
Yeah, for sure.
Not necessarily to get deeper, but just to understand, like, just to permeate it, like, just to get into it in a way that, like, I think it's, like, intimidating you from, like, by design, just, like, you're going to fight for this one.
I mean, this is my second time reading it, and when I looked at my...
How long ago did you read the first one?
5 years, 6 years. I like when I looked back and reread what I had written about it at the time that I read it, because I try to write like a little paragraph about every book that I read, so that I can, you know, have a record of the things that I've read. I had basically the same thoughts that I have now, which is like, okay, so the plot is incomprehensible to me, other than it being like a noir thing, but also like the things about this book that interest me are like the fashion and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Crime?
Yeah, today's crime is evading your taxes. Pay your taxes, rich people.